He was a racing driver whose name still echoes through the halls of motorsport as a symbol of daring and unbridled passion. His fearless approach to racing and willingness to push his car to the very limits endeared him to fans around the world and made him a hero among his fellow drivers. But his life was cut tragically short, leaving a void in a sport that has yet to be filled. Gilles Villeneuve was a true racing legend, and his legacy continues to inspire and captivate fans of the sport to this day. Gilles Villeneuve was born in 1950 in the small town of Berthierville, Quebec, Canada. He grew up in a family of modest means. His father was a piano tutor who loved to perform car stunts and taught Gilles to drive at the age of 9. He was fascinated by cars and racing as he would often tinker with engines and build go-karts with his friends. In his early 20s, Gilles began racing snowmobiles and later moved on to cars. He quickly made a name for himself in the Canadian racing scene, winning multiple championships and impressing everyone with his raw talent and fearless approach. One person he impressed was James Hunt by beating him and several other racing stars in a non-championship Formula Atlantic race. This led to the McLaren team offering Villeneuve a Formula One deal for up to 5 races in their third car during the 1977 season. Villeneuve made his debut at the British Grand Prix, where he qualified 9th in McLaren's old car, separating the regular drivers Hunt and Jochen Mass, who were driving newer M26. Despite being delayed for 2 laps by a faulty temperature gauge, he set the 5th fastest lap and finished 11th. The British press coverage of Villeneuve's performance was generally complimentary. However, shortly after the British race, McLaren's team manager Teddy Mayer decided to not continue with Villeneuve for the following year, leaving him with no solid options for 1978. In August of that year, Villeneuve flew to Italy to meet Enzo Ferrari, who was immediately reminded of Tazio Nuvolari, a famous European champion. After a session at Ferrari's Fiorano track, Ferrari was satisfied with Villeneuve's promise. He signed to drive for Ferrari in the last 2 races of 1977, as well as for the full 1978 season. He had achieved his dreams, first to be a racing driver, second to be a Formula One driver, and third to drive with the legendary Ferrari. Sadly, Villeneuve suffered several retirements due to issues with his Michelin tires and being prone to mistakes and crashes. For example, he crashed out of the lead at the United States Grand Prix in Long Beach, which was a huge blow. Ferrari continued to support him despite of calls for his replacement, and it would pay off, as towards the end of the season his results improved and he finished 3rd at the Austrian Grand Prix, before putting on an impressive show at his home Grand Prix, the Canadian Grand Prix. As it was time for qualifying, Gilles took 3rd place after a couple of other drivers retired. Then it was time for the race. Jerry, who had qualified on pole, kept the lead from the start. Alan Jones had a magnificent start, jumping from 5th to 2nd. This meant that Villeneuve dropped down to 4th. The race leader, Jerrier, had opened up a lead of 20 seconds, and Jones in 2nd was holding up the faster cars of Jody Scheckter and Villeneuve behind him. However, on lap 18, Scheckter found a way past, and Villeneuve followed him a lap later. A good few laps on lap 25 saw the very fast Villeneuve finding his way past 2nd, just when trouble was beginning for the race leader who raced for Lotus. A good amount of laps later, Jerrier was found with no oil pressure. This was fantastic for the Canadian fans, whose hero Villeneuve now looked set to take his first victory at home. From then on, the order did not change, and Villeneuve came home to take his first ever Grand Prix victory in front of his own fans. He had finally proved everyone how talented he was and cemented him as a force to be reckoned with for the following season. Fortunately, the next season would be a huge test for him, and now he was more than ready to put his name with the all-time greats for good. Villeneuve was joined by Jody Scheckter in 1979 after his old teammate moved to Lotus. As they headed into the season, the favorites to win the title were the strong Ferrari duo. The first race was in Buenos Aires, Argentina. Scheckter qualified on the 3rd row, while Villeneuve qualified P2. This wouldn't matter much though, as in the first lap, Scheckter was caught up in a huge collision, and not much later the engine of Gilles broke down. The Brazil Grand Prix was not too long after, as Gilles and Scheckter both qualified on the third row. They would finish in the same position for the race, getting P5 and P6 respectively. Then, it was the South African Grand Prix, and Villeneuve qualified third, but went on to drive an excellent race, finishing in first place. Scheckter was not far behind though, who was looking to challenge for the title. In Long Beach, where Villeneuve failed last time around, was not going to let that happen again, and Villeneuve had a great start, taking pole position and then leading all 80 laps of the American race. Jody Scheckter finished second right behind him. Fortunes would change though, as in the next race, Villeneuve had a poor race, finishing P7 while Jody finished P2. Scheckter would continue to dominate, taking a win by 15 seconds at the Belgium Grand Prix, where Villeneuve struggled and got lapped, finishing P7, which meant no points. The 1979 Monaco Grand Prix was held on the 27th of May 1979. In the 37th Monaco Grand Prix and the 7th round of the 1979 Formula 1 season, the 76-lap race was won from pole position by Jody Scheckter, with Villeneuve retiring from a transmission issue. Not too long after, one of the most fearsome races for Gilles took place. He had a fierce battle with René Arnoux in the Renault, constantly switching positions for second in the race. He would eventually finish second, and in the next race, Scheckter got 2 points. Meanwhile, Villeneuve had a fuel system issue which took him out of contention. 2 races later, the Dutch Grand Prix took place. Gilles had a bad qualifying, but in the race something more important happened. On lap 49, he spun onto the wall, causing him to have a puncture. He was ready to give up, but a voice inside him told him that it's time to race like there's no tomorrow.
Yes, and Villeneuve's lost it! Incredible! Villeneuve, 360-degree spin. Jones manages to avoid him and goes through and takes the lead. Fantastic! And that was the Austrian Grand Prix in 19...
He reversed out of the mud and went out to do laps with only 3 tires until he was told that it was too damaged for repair. This showed how he was not like other drivers. He was different, he was determined like no other, and he would win the title at all costs. Scheckter got second that race, putting Villeneuve at a huge disadvantage in the championship battle. In the Italian Grand Prix, he took second behind Scheckter, losing by a margin of 0.5 seconds. Next time round in Canada, he took second, with Scheckter in fourth, and then in the US Grand Prix, he would go on to drive a brilliant race. In practice, Villeneuve was over 11 seconds faster than Jody. In qualifying, he out-qualified Scheckter by 2 whole seconds. Then, in the race, he was set to win the championship. On lap 48, Scheckter had a tire failure, leaving him out of the race. This meant Villeneuve went out to drive a masterpiece of a race, finishing 48 seconds ahead of his nearest rival. Who was he now, the world champion? Sadly for him, no. He would not have enough points to finish ahead of his teammate, and although losing by just a margin of 4 points, Gilles was still considered a champion by many. This by far showed his passion for racing, the sheer skill and determination of Gilles. He was at another level compared to others, but suffered a lot of bad luck throughout his championship, which saw him lose. In the next season, Ferrari performed poorly, with Villeneuve and Scheckter scoring only 6 and 2 points respectively. Despite this, Gilles had shown glimmers of hope, and proving to all once again that he could be champion given the better car. In 1981, Ferrari introduced their first turbocharged F1 car, which had poor handling but immense power. Villeneuve won 2 races that season and impressed with his ability to win in a difficult car. Despite receiving an offer from McLaren, Villeneuve stayed with Ferrari for the 1982 season and had a strong start, leading in Brazil and finishing 3rd in the United States, before being disqualified. At the San Marino Grand Prix, Ferrari ordered their drivers to slow down to conserve fuel, but Pironi passed Villeneuve and won the race, leading to Villeneuve feeling betrayed and vowing never to speak to Pironi again. It was May 8th, 1982. Tragedy struck the world of Formula 1 when Gilles Villeneuve died during the final qualifying session of the Belgian Grand Prix. Villeneuve was pushing his Ferrari to the limit when he collided with Jochen Mass's slower car, causing his own car to become airborne and crash into the ground. Despite the efforts of other drivers who rushed to his aid, he was not breathing and was quickly transferred to a hospital in Leuven. Specialists from around the world were consulted, but the injury was too severe and he passed away later that day while on life support. His death shook the racing community to its core and led to an inquiry into the accident. The investigation concluded that Villeneuve was at fault for the collision, but the loss of such a talented and daring driver left a void that could never be filled. Despite a relatively short career, Villeneuve won 6 Grand Prix races and achieved 13 podium finishes. He was known for his incredible speed and bravery on track, as well as his approachable personality and willingness to speak informally with fans and the media. Despite his untimely death, Villeneuve's legacy lives on in the world of motorsport. He is still remembered fondly by fans and fellow racers alike, and many tributes have been paid to him over the years. Racetracks in Italy and Canada have been named after him, and he has been inducted into the Canadian Motorsport Hall of Fame. His son, Jacques Villeneuve, has also had a successful racing career and has continued to use the number 27 in honor of his father. Jacques went on to become an accomplished racing driver in his own right, winning the Formula One World Championship in 1997. Gilles Villeneuve's passion, talent, and fearlessness on the racetrack have left an indelible mark on the world of Formula One and continues to inspire fans and drivers alike to this day.